Imagine waking up one day and realizing that every choice you've made, every yes you thought was yours, every opinion you thought was authentic was carefully planted by someone else. Not by some cartoonish villain in a trench coat twirling a mustache, but by people you trust, people you love, your boss, your partner, your oldest friend, and worst of all, maybe even yourself. You replay the last argument you lost not because your point was weak, but because they made you question your right to speak at all.
I saw reflections, but they weren't my own. Felt like a stranger in my skin and bones. Every step I took just led me astray, till the night showed mercy and lit up my way. I got lost, but I found my soul.
You remember saying yes to a favor you didn't want to do, only to realize days later that the guilt you felt wasn't yours to carry. You recall how every time you tried to set a boundary, you walked away from the conversation feeling like the selfish one. Something's wrong, but it's not loud. It's subtle. It doesn't shout, it whispers in your own voice. That's the terrifying brilliance of manipulation. It doesn't break down the door, it gets you to open it yourself. And here's the true horror. Most manipulators don't even know they're doing it. They're simply playing out patterns that have always worked. Patterns society rewards. Patterns we mistake for charm, intelligence, even love. But if that's true, if manipulation is baked into the architecture of how people relate, how would you even begin to see it? And if you can't see it, how can you possibly defend yourself against it? Maybe you think you're too smart to be manipulated, that you're emotionally intelligent, self-aware, armored by boundaries. But that's exactly how the best manipulators work, by convincing you there's no war to begin with. Think of the friend who always turns your pain into their story. The co-worker who makes you feel guilty for saying no, even when your plate is full. The partner who forgets things only when it's convenient for them, then blames you for keeping score. Is it strategy or coincidence? Are they confused or calculating? And if you bring it up, will they apologize or accuse you of being the manipulator? Now imagine something even darker. What if the manipulator isn't a person at all? What if it's a worldview? A quiet, inherited script passed from generation to generation. The kind that teaches you to be agreeable, to be liked, to not make things difficult. What if you've been gaslighted not by a single person but by culture itself? Niccolò Machiavelli, centuries ago, understood something most modern people still haven't grasped: that manipulation isn't a glitch in the system. It is the system. In politics, in relationships, in the office, in the mirror. His book, The Prince, wasn't a manifesto of evil, it was a manual of realism. A guide to surviving in a world where people often want control more than connection. Where kindness is a currency. Where trust is a tool. Where sincerity is a weakness to be weaponized. But if that's true, if the world really is a chessboard of hidden motives, how can you play the game without losing your soul? How can you protect yourself without becoming like them? That's the paradox.
of day. Each town just leans into the wind, then lets me go along my way.
Manipulation doesn't start in the hands of a villain. It starts in the heart of a child. Long before we learn words like gaslighting, coercion, or emotional blackmail, we learn something far more dangerous: that love is conditional, that safety comes when we please others, that being good means being useful. A child learns to read the room before they learn to read a book. They learn which tone of voice makes their parents smile, which version of themselves avoids punishment, which feelings are too much, which truths are better left unsaid. This is where manipulation takes root, not as an act of malice, but as a strategy for survival. By the time we're adults, the mask isn't a mask anymore. It's our face. But here's the twist: manipulation isn't just what others do to us. It's what we do to ourselves every time we betray our truth to preserve someone else's comfort. Every time we say yes when we mean no, just to avoid tension. Every time we smile when we want to scream. We call it compromise, empathy, social intelligence. But as Carl Jung warned, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And most of us trade that privilege for approval before we even know we have it. This is the hidden problem. Manipulation thrives not because people are evil, but because people are afraid of rejection, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of losing love, losing control, or being seen as difficult. So we become palatable, predictable, polished. We rehearse our emotions like actors. We learn how to say just enough truth to seem authentic, and just enough deceit to stay safe. And we surround ourselves with others who do the same. Society rewards it. Look around. The most successful people are rarely the most honest. They're the best at framing, at managing perception, at telling people what they want to hear, while quietly getting what they want. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this perfectly. In The Prince, he wrote, "It is unnecessary for a prince to have all the good qualities I have enumerated, but it is very necessary to appear to have them." He wasn't advocating for cruelty, he was describing reality. A world where sincerity is less powerful than the appearance of sincerity. Where it's better to be feared than loved if you can't be both. Where power lies in perception, not in principle. And here's what makes it worse. Even when we recognize manipulation, we often can't stop it. Why? Because we're neurologically wired to seek connection even at the cost of truth. The human brain, especially the limbic system, is hypersensitive to social cues. Evolutionarily, exile meant death, so we developed a sixth sense for how others see us. We mirror body language. We modulate our tone. We subconsciously adapt our beliefs to align with our tribe. This is known as social conformity bias. It's not weakness, it's wiring. But manipulators exploit that wiring. They create emotional pressure cookers. They dangle approval like a carrot. They make you question whether your reality is too sensitive, too much, or wrong. And once they've cracked your perception of reality, once you doubt your own instincts, they don't need to control you. You'll do it to yourself. Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "Compassion is the basis of morality." But manipulators weaponize compassion. They turn your empathy into a leash. They cry at the perfect moment. They talk about their pain just enough to silence your anger. They don't deny your boundaries, they simply make you feel guilty for having them. And yet, they don't always know they're doing it, because they were once children too. They learned that affection could be earned by pleasing, and safety by performing. Manipulation is often generational, a quiet inheritance, a blueprint passed down in invisible ink. You might hear echoes of it in phrases like, "Don't air our dirty laundry. If you really loved me, you'd. You're just being dramatic. I didn't say that you're misremembering." These aren't just bad communication habits. They're scripts designed to erase reality, to preserve power dynamics under the illusion of love. So what do? Do we confront every manipulator in our lives, cut ties, burn bridges, harden ourselves into cynics? Not yet. Because here's the cruelest twist. Sometimes the manipulator is you. Every time you sugarcoat the truth to keep someone close, every time you hint instead of ask, every time you play helpless when you're angry, or charming when you're scared, you're not being authentic. You're managing. You're doing what Machiavelli described as playing the fox. Clever, elusive, persuasive. Because deep down, you're still terrified of being the lion, direct, bold, unapologetically real. So maybe the first step to outsmarting manipulators is recognizing the one in your own mind. The version of you that believes people won't. Love the truth. The voice that says, be nice, not honest. Be agreeable, not authentic. Be liked, not real. Until we confront that voice, every tactic we use to spot manipulation in others will be incomplete, because we'll still be vulnerable to the deepest manipulation of all, self-betrayal. Now, we're ready to go deeper, to examine the cost, because the problem isn't just emotional, it's existential. Let's explore what happens when manipulation isn't just a tactic, but a way of life. What happens when entire societies' entire selves are built on performance over truth? What are they? Unseen consequences?
Names all fade like yesterday. Each town just leans into the wind, then lets me go along my way.
At first, it feels like strategy, a clever way to move through the world unscathed. Smile at the boss, laugh at the joke that wasn't funny, say it's fine when it's not. You don't feel manipulated, you feel in control. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, something begins to rot beneath the surface, because the longer you wear a mask, the more it fuses to your skin, and the more fluent you become in the language of manipulation, whether as speaker or listener, the harder it becomes to know what's real. You lose the signal of your own feelings, not because someone took it from you, but because you trained yourself to stop listening. Your boundaries blur. Your identity becomes reactive. Your peace becomes dependent on how well you can manage other people's moods. It's not just psychological anymore. It's physiological. When you're in a manipulative dynamic, especially chronic, low-grade manipulation, you're nervous system becomes hypervigilant. You enter a state of constant micro-survival. Heart rate elevated. Breathing shallow. Muscles tense. You're not relaxed, you're monitoring for tone shifts, for eye rolls, for passive aggression wrapped in pleasantries. You become addicted to decoding subtext because, in manipulative environments, the truth is never said directly over time. This leads to decision fatigue and emotional exhaustion, not from dramatic outbursts, but from the subtle erosion of autonomy, from second-guessing yourself so many times that doubt becomes your baseline. And here's where it gets worse. You begin to internalize the manipulator's voice. They don't need to gaslight you anymore, you do it to yourself. They don't need to shame you, you pre-shame yourself to stay ahead of the hurt. They don't even need to lie, you've already rewritten your reality to make their behavior understandable. This is the legacy of manipulation. Self-doubt becomes your compass. And if you trust doubt more than truth, you'll never feel safe, even when you are. Viktor Frankl once wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." But what happens when the situation you can't change is the invisible pressure to keep others comfortable, no matter the cost? Society rarely tells us this is a problem. In fact, society rewards it. Politeness over honesty, appearance over substance, the curated self over the chaotic, complicated truth. Entire industries thrive on our discomfort with authenticity. Social media is built on performance. Corporate culture is built on diplomacy over directness. Even personal relationships are often built not on mutual understanding, but on mutual avoidance. We're told to keep the peace, even if it means silencing ourselves. We're told to be professional, even when it means tolerating subtle abuse. We praise people who can handle difficult people with a smile, but we never question why those people are allowed to be difficult in the first place. This isn't just personal anymore. This is cultural. In many societies, especially collectivist or hierarchical ones, manipulation is disguised as respect, deference, obedience, etiquette. You're taught not to question authority, not to disrupt harmony, not to make a scene. But harmony without truth is not peace. It's performance. It's an elaborate dance where everyone knows the steps, but no one knows who they are dancing with. Even in individualistic cultures, the manipulation just wears a different mask. There, it's selling yourself, personal branding, winning friends, and influencing people. Always smiling, always packaging, always selling, and eventually something inside you breaks. But it doesn't shatter loudly, it dissolves, quietly like color fading from a photograph. You stop speaking up not because you can't, but because you no longer remember how. You stay in relationships where you're not seen, not because you're weak, but because you've been conditioned to believe this is normal. You ignore your instincts not because they're wrong, but because you've been gaslight into believing your discomfort is a flaw. This is the unseen consequence. You lose your inner authority. You no longer know if what you feel is valid, if what you want is reasonable, if who you are is too much or not enough. And when that happens, you become ripe for deeper forms of exploitation, not just from manipulative people, but from systems. Religious systems, corporate systems, political systems, All of them thrive when people are trained to distrust their own minds. The moment you lose your sovereignty over yourself, your emotions, your needs, your reality, you become manageable, controllable, useful. You become the perfect citizen, the ideal employee, the loyal partner who never questions why they're always apologizing. And here's the chilling part. It feels familiar. It feels like just how life is, because you've lived with this manipulation for so long. Anything else feels unsafe, even freedom. But the soul knows. Something deep and buried within you aches when you're being controlled. A kind of quiet rebellion starts brewing in your chest. Not rage, just a persistent whisper. This isn't who I am. But you ignore it because you're lucky to have this job, because no one else would understand, because it's not that bad. Until one day it is that bad. Until one day you can no longer tell where you end and they begin. Until one day you wake up and realize you've been living someone else's story. This is not a life. This is a hostage situation dressed in civility. But here's the truth. Manipulation only works when the target believes they don't have power. That's the illusion. That you're trapped. That you have no choice. What you do, you always have it's just been buried beneath layers of fear, politeness, and performance. So now the question changes. Not just how do you recognize manipulation, but how do you rebel against it? How do you break the trance? How do you reclaim your reality, your voice, your power without becoming a manipulator yourself? The answer lies not in confrontation, but in reconstruction. And that's where we go next. There is a moment, quiet, still, often terrifying, when you finally stop playing the game. You stop trying to be liked. You stop managing other people's perceptions. You stop bargaining with your own soul. And in that silence, something ancient stirs within you. Not rage, not defiance, but a truth. Not just your truth, the truth. And here it is. You were never meant to be controlled because you were never born to be a role. From the moment you could speak, the world handed you scripts. Be the good child, the helpful friend, the reliable employee, the agreeable partner. Say what keeps the peace. Feel what makes others comfortable. Want only what doesn't inconvenience anyone. And slowly, invisibly, you became a character in someone else's play. A story written by fear, directed by culture, and performed on the stage of survival. But underneath it all, beneath the masks, the compromises, the yes that should have been a no, was something that never died. Your inner authority. It waited, patiently, silently, like fire buried under snow. And now, it's waking up. The final realization isn't about tactics or defense. It's not about learning how to expose manipulators or master emotional warfare. It's about finally remembering what you are, a sovereign being. Not someone to be persuaded, but someone to be met. Not a vessel for others' needs, but a source of your own clarity. The manipulator loses all power the moment you stop outsourcing your truth. Because that's what manipulation feeds on. Your doubt, your need for permission, your fear of rejection. But once you stop needing those things, their game collapses. This is what Machiavelli never wrote about. Because it's not about power over others. It's about power over your own narrative. You don't win by becoming more clever. You win by becoming more whole. And when you're whole, manipulation becomes visible, obvious, small. What once felt like psychological warfare now feels like noise. Someone trying to control your weather from outside the window of your soul. They can knock. They can shout. But you've remembered where the door is and who holds the key. You do. Always did. The final truth is this. No one can manipulate a person who no longer fears being misunderstood. Let that sink in when you stop needing others to get you, when you stop needing them to validate your feelings, to approve of your decisions, to applaud your boundaries. You become free. Free in a way most people never are. And that freedom is threatening to those still playing roles. It's uncomfortable to those still wearing masks. It's confusing to those who believe love must be earned. But to those seeking truth, it's magnetic, because freedom recognizes freedom. Truth calls to truth. And every time you live in your authority, you unconsciously invite others to do the same. You don't need to fight manipulators. You don't even need to expose them. You just need to stop participating. Stop negotiating your worth. Stop softening your boundaries. Stop shrinking so others can feel tall. You are not here to be edited. You are here to be seen. Fully, clearly, without apology. So the final act of rebellion is this: to be who you are without shame, to speak without permission, to walk away without guilt, to love without performance, to live without the weight of pleasing. And when you do, something extraordinary happens. You stop attracting manipulators altogether, because manipulators don't waste time on those who can't be moved. They seek the pliable, the unsure, the eager to please. But when you embody your truth, you become unreadable to them. Not because you're cold, but because you're complete. They look for the cracks in the mask, but you're not wearing one. They test for buttons to push, but you've disabled the panel. They try to bait you into doubt, but you've already chosen trust, not in them, in you. And that is the end of the manipulation. Not with a confrontation, not with a battle, with a quiet, irrevocable decision. I will no longer abandon myself to keep others comfortable. That sentence is your sword, your shield, your liberation. So now, as we end this journey, don't ask, how do I outsmart manipulators? Ask instead, what version of myself would never tolerate manipulation to begin with? And become that. Because in the end, the genius way to outsmart manipulators is not by learning their tricks. It's by becoming someone who no longer lives in the conditions that let those tricks work. That's not a tactic. That's transformation. And it starts now.